let's talk about React. So now we are switching totally from backend to the frontend. So we are not talking about anything about backend. So React is the front-end library. It's developed by Facebook back in the days, and it's open sourced since 2013. So it has been open sourced more than 10 years. And although it is basically only front-end library, it can be considered as a framework or cult or whatever. It's the most used JavaScript or TypeScript framework that is available for the front-end development. And the aim is to provide an easy and fast way to build, for example, front-end user interfaces, and that's the thing we are doing on this course. We are not doing anything else, but React could be also used for single-page applications or even mobile apps. There are this React Native. And the server side, which we have been talking about on the previous videos, it is still handled by Node.js and Express. For example, the backend can be done with a Python or PHP or whatever, Java, Rust, but then the React is connecting to the backend. And if we wish to have a React in the backend so that we would build a static web pages and provide them to the browser, then we could use, for example, Next.js that is doing that thing, helping us to use React in the static web pages on the server side. And of course, there are plenty of external packages to extend features of React. Similarly, with the Node.js and Express, there are plenty and millions of packages that can be installed by npm. So for example, if we are building a React app that we would need a calendar, then we just install some kind of a calendar package, or we will need some kind of a nice login form or a digital clock or whatever. There is probably a package for that. So what kind of architecture does this React have? So it uses JavaScript syntax extension, which means that we are writing like HTML page with JavaScript inside it, but it's still the page is actually JavaScript. It just looks like HTML. So there are a few differences. For example, the keyword class cannot be used. So if we are using a CSS class, we need to use the keyword class name. And all the tags, React components need to be always closed. So we cannot have those, for example, image tag as a open. It need to be closed. And React is heavily based on components, including other components that can then include components which can include components. So everything in a React is a component. It can be think like that we have a div element that includes h1 element. So we can think that we have a div as a component, and then we have a h1 inside the div, and it's a component. And the other thing that React is heavily having is this props idea. So component can have props and give props to other components. And these props, they are like properties. But we are using the word props because these props have properties, and to have properties that would make my mind melt. So it's props that have properties. And they are like parameters. So if you are giving them to another component, you are giving like a parameter to that component. And no browser understands this JSX. So it needs to be compiled to JavaScript before browsers understand it. So it like removes those fake HTML and builds a JavaScript that is then actually building the HTML. So soon we will build this kind of an application, which is a thing that is showing poems, and then we have this add poem part. So here a single poem, like this pink box here, is a component. And all these single poems, they are inside the poems component that are then inside the app component that also includes this add poem component. So everything really is a component. So how do we get started? So there are plenty of tools how to install React and the package So we are using this Vite. It's just one tool that is a lot used in the web development. It gives us the way to create some boilerplate project, for example for React, but also to other tools. So this installation process, it takes a while and builds quite large folder structure. For example, if we just build a simple React boilerplate, it's over 70 megabytes, so there will be a lot of JavaScript code. And React components. So components can be created with functions or with class keyword, and this arrow function syntax, it seems to be a bit shorter. And components need to have a key. So then the React understand that this component is different than this other one when they have the individual different unique key. And then props can be of course received and given. And in this code we are having this interface poems props, which is pretty much the same we have had on the Node.js part, these interfaces. And here we are building this component poems, and it has a one prop poems. Actually it's destructured props that we are only taking the poems out of that. And then we are building this div element, that inside this div element we are going through this poems array, taking one poem out of that array, and then creating a new component called poem, and we are giving it a key, so it's unique then, and then we are just giving as a props this poem. So the actual poem is given as a props to this poem component. Does this look silly? Let's have an example on this and let's make it clear. With this Vite thing we can start doing different things. So we can use, for example, Vue, React, Preact, Lit, Svelte, Solid or Quick, and also with TypeScript these same things. So this is a tool that is handy for different things. But as mentioned, we are building a React app, so we can just have a empty folder and npm create Vite and latest. So this will help us to build the project. So what kind of a project we are now building? We are building a, let's say, React project. This project is now called a React, that's the name. And then we can here select what we are doing, and this is React, and we can use JavaScript or TypeScript. Let's go with TypeScript, it's far better. And now something happened, and let's see, we have this React folder, so our project has been built here, and we can now just use this npm install, so we are getting everything what we need in this application. It will take a while, as mentioned, there is a lot to download and then install. And now it's done. So let's just start the Visual Studio Code here, like this. So now we have plenty of files here, and let's first have a terminal here. We could actually start the application, so npm run dev. And now it seems that this Vite is a tool that is helping us, and Ctrl+Shift+C, and now here is our application. Now it's up and running. So this boilerplate gave us this Vite logo and this React logo. And then there is even a button that I can press, and it will give a counter there. And these are actually links. So we have plenty of files here. We have some config files. We do not need to worry about these. These are absolutely fine here in the start. And here in the README there are some things that you can further configure if you wish, but they are not mandatory right now. So in the package.json we have already installed quite a few packages, and then there is this index HTML, and it's only reading this main tsx file. So let's see, where is this main TSX file. It's here. And what is this doing? It's creating a root element, and then there is this app, which is the actual starting point. So then we go further, we can go this app TSX, and here we have the actual what we are seeing on this web page. So there are like basically two images which are links, and then we have this counter. So how this counter is done? So in a JavaScript you would get like a get document element by ID and then modify its content, but in React we just have this kind of a code. So we have a button, and then we have an on click, and it sets the counter +1. So what is this counter here? In the beginning we said that we have this count, and then there's a set count method that will be used. So it then increases the counter. This is how the use states things work in React. It looks a bit strange, but in the end we will get used to it. And then there is this asset folder that has only this React SVG. There is a public folder that has a SVG files, and then there is this node module folder. Let's start our application, our design. So we want to give this get this poem things. So let's see, here is our app. So let's remove, let's keep this here, but let's change this. We do not need that one here. We can start with this div, and let's close this div here like this. We can add a h1, so this is poems, and now when we refresh it will definitely work as we are expecting. So now we have h1 poems, so this CSS seems to be quite big here, but it doesn't matter, it is still working. And now we would need the place for these poems, and then some kind of a place for adding new poems. But let's first fix this. So now we had the counter, and React is now telling that we have this count, it's like a variable. It's declared, but its value is never read, so it's probably code that would be good for deletion. So we are now modifying it, so we need to have this poems and set poems. And here in the use state we will first need to define the interface for the poem. iPoem. And these poems, these have ID. So basically, if you are getting any stuff from our database, you have the ID there. And then we have the actual poem, which is a string, of course. And then we have this VIP status, which is Boolean. So some poems are very important, like this. And now here in the use state, we can define that we are having this iPoem array like this, and then we are not having a 0 here, we are having actually some kind of a array of poems. So when this starts, we are getting a few poems here. So let's fix this issue. Now it's working well. Now we have some poems, so we would want to get these poems to be visible on our screen. So let's here add a poem component, actually poems component, and we are giving it props, and what we are giving there is this poems that we are defining here. And let's close this like that. And now we need to create those components. So let's first add a folder, components. And then let's add the component called poems, TSX. And we will also need to have the individual poem.tsx. So we could have this poems component that would draw all the poems to the page, But as this React is very component based, so we are building a smaller component, which is this one individual poem. So now we have the components here, then let's build them. Let's start with these poems. So first let's import React from React. Like this, we will need this. And now our component is getting these props, so let's build an interface for them. Like this, so this interface is telling that we have this poem, which is an array, poems actually, yeah, this is poems array, and it has the one poem has these types. So then we are going to build the actual component called poems, and what kind of a props this is actually getting. Now we are using the TypeScript, and there are some different ways to handle the definition what kind of a type we are having. So one is to use this react.fc. So this is like a function component, and here we can define that this is having this poems props, and then we can actually define this component. So the props, we are getting out of that the poems part, so we are destructuring it and getting only these poems. And in the React, it's this component, like it starts with this return, so it's returning this content of this component. So we are having a div here, like this, and here inside this div we are just printing something. We want to go through this array and get those poems to the screen. As all these React parts are inside these curly brackets, so let's have this poems array, and we can use this map to go through it. Let's take one poem out of the poems array, and then what we can do, we can use another component. So in this case, this is this poem component. And now we need to define that this individual poem has some kind of a key, so it's unique. And this key is this poem.id, so we have this ID here, so we can use that. And then we have this VIP value, it's this poem.vip, and then we are also having this poem, which is this poem.poem. And let's close this like this. And now we still don't have this poem component. It's here coming, but it's not ready. So here we are setting that all these parts are in the different as a different prop. Let's then finally export this. Here. And now as this poem we have not built it, we need to also import it. This poem is in the same folder, so we need to just use this /. Now it works, but this poem is it has no default export, for example, because the file is completely empty. So also this file starts with this React import, and then we have the interface called poem props. And here the only things that we are needing is the VIP, which is Boolean, and this poem, which is of course string. We do not need the ID anymore. The ID was used in the poems part. And now the actual component. So once again we start with const poem, and we use this React function component. and we define that it using this poem props, and it is having, now we are here, we have like 3 different props, so we only need 2 of those, so this boolean, this VIP and poem value. So let's take only those, so we can have this VIP and poem like this, and then we will have the actual content, but first we can export this default poem. Here we are now returning, of course, this what is inside, and let's have a div here, and the actual poem can then live in the paragraph. This will have some kind of a class, so now we need to use this class name instead of class, because React is React. And then, so if there is this VIP value true, then we want to have a class name VIP, otherwise we do not need any class name. So let's have this VIP checked, and if it is true, then that's VIP class. If it's not, then we can just have the empty value there. And then the actual, yes, this is wrong. The actual content here is this poem, like this. Cannot find this poems component because it has not been imported, so let's have a it here. So import poems from the components / poems, and now we have the title here, and then we have the 3 different poems here. So our application is now showing all these poems inside the web page when they are divided into 2 different components. This poems component is building this outer div, and then this it is then using this poem component that is then building the actual poem inside that poem. So I have installed this React Developer add-on to Chrome, and now we can go to the inspector, and we can see that here we have a components part, and this components part is now saying that we have this app component, which is the root part in our application, and it has these poems, which has then these individual poem components and their keys. So this is quite handy when you are working with React. But now we can see that none of these are bolded, although in the here in the list this first should be VIP. So let's see, the reason is that because we don't have any VIP class, so let's add this VIP, and font weight, let's go with 900, so it's as weight as is get, and immediately when we save this app CSS, now the first one here is the bolded one. So we have somewhere text alignment is center, and yeah, this is pretty much what we have here. Then we are still missing the form that we could actually add some kind of a new poems here. So let's add that part. So in our app component, let's add here a new part. So we need a new component called add poem, and it has a method on add, and we are then having this method here. It's well, let's build first this component. We don't need to worry about that method. So now we need to add that component, add poem, and then we need to also include it here. Yes, now it is okay. Then let's go this add poem. And now what we are needing this React, but we are also needing this use stage, because we are doing something that is changing the state of the web page in essence. First, let's have this interface. This has this on add, and this is, we have this poem, so we are defining that we have on add method, and it will take parameters. It will take a poem that has a VIP status and content, so there are boolean and string, and this method will return nothing, so it's void. Then we can build the component, and we need to use this React function component, and we can use this add poem props now. And then we are having this on add component prop, which we have not yet defined. Let's not add it yet. Let's build first the component structure. What we are returning. So we are just building the form here. So we have a div. Inside this div we have a form. And inside the form we have a label. Where we can say that let's have a poem here. Then we have a text area, where we have a placeholder and poem. Let's close that one. Then we have a second label for this VIP, and here we have an input element which type is checkbox, so someone can check that if is important or not. So we could have this like this. No, this input is here, and then the label is like here, and this input, well, it can be in two different parts, but it also can be this single part. And then the label is closed. Then we have just some button add poem, and the type of this button is submit, and then let's export this. Like this. And now our application is not working because we have not, this on add is required, but we do not have it yet. And now let's actually build the on add here. So we are giving a props that is now not just data but actual function. So this is this add poem. So we are giving add poem function, and now we need to of course build this function. So it's const add poem. So what this function is doing, we have a poem object that has this VIP status. We are just setting it what kind of a types we have here. So it has this VIP and string. And then the actual function. So first we will need some kind of ID. So there are node packages like UUID or something, but in this case we are just building a very simple ID, which is of course number, and it's just a random number. Very big random number. That's the ID. Then there is this new poem, which is the parameter in that function. Its type is this iPoem. We are building this new poem, which is type as this iPoem. Yes, I mean iPoem. So it has this ID, which is here generated. Then it has this poem part, which is this poem.content. And finally we have this VIP poem VIP. And now we are actually seeing our page. And well, this does nothing. So our poems are living in here. So let's then check that. So we are using this set poems, which is defined here, that the set poems method changes this poems data structure. So set poems, and what we are giving it, we are having array. First, there will be every poem of this array, and then there is this also this new poem added to the end. If this would be vice versa, then we would be adding the new poem in the front, but now we are adding all the poems. This means that we are adding all the poems, and then we are just adding this one in the end. And now we have this kind of a method, but it's still not working because this button does nothing. So let's then go to this add poem, and now we need to build this method functionality for this on submit. So our form, so on submit, we are doing something. So we are handle submit. So this is what we are doing in React. We can have this kind of a way to write. So on submit, what we are using this handle submit function. So let's build that function here. So we are getting a parameter that is this React form event. That's the type. And then we are, first of all, we have this form. We are preventing the default. So we are not going to call any server. We are preventing that. And then let's see what happens if we just log this. Let's log that. Let's see what happens. Let's have this inspector here. So now we did get something. So we have here the text area. We have the input. We have the button. So everything is going okay. So we got the element there, the form, and now we need to get this VIP and content. So let's first then build the states for this VIP and content. So similarly as we have the state of this poems array, we will now have the state for this text area and this VIP, so we know exactly all the time, React knows all the time what are the statuses of these two ports. So these are very simple, just one line of code. So const, we have this element VIP and then set VIP and this use state. It's a boolean and the default it's false. Similarly, we will have this content, set content, use state as a, and that's a string, and the default is empty. So now we have these states for these two elements here. Now we can then play with them. And instead of just logging this whole form, we can now log the VIP and content. Let's see what happens. Now they are false and empty, of course, because we have set them so. So they were empty, but that's not what we want. So when someone is writing something here, we would like to have the state to be changed. So we have this on change, and once again now we can write the React code here. So we have this form here. So set content target value, it's giving us the textual value, and we are also setting that the value itself on this form equals to this content, like this. So now every time this text area is changing, this content is also changing. Now this should be something else than empty. Let's try that. So now this is set, and here we have a text. So it's still false because we have not set this code to this checkbox, but here in the text area it is working and the state has been changed. So now we have always, when we change this text, the value here will also be changing. Let's make the same for this checkbox. So on change, like this, and then of course we will also have the checked, and it equals this VIP, not CIP but VIP. So now also this will work. Yes, and now we are still missing that this when we are modifying this stuff here, it should be handled by this function here, so this add poem. Now this would then modify this array, which would then reflect to here, and we would get a new poem to our screen. So let's add that part. And this is not that hard because we have already here this as a parameter, this function. So let's just use this function. So on add, and what we are adding this object which has this VIP and content part as this. Oh yeah, so I have a mistake here. Of course we are only taking this on add here like that. So we are destructuring the props and we are taking the on add part. So now the on add is working. So now we have a function defined in the app component. Then the function is given as a prop to this add poem component, and this add poem component is now using this function to add these values here, which is then adding the values here in this state, this array, in a sense. So now we can actually check that how our component tree is looking. Now we have also this add component here, and now we are adding a new poem. So we got a new poem here, and it has a random ID, big number, and let's add a new poem there. Yeah, it's getting there, and we can of course go and check what are the values of these props. So there are this poem and VIP statuses, and this poem component has these subcomponents props, and it's working. So we got a bolded array, bolded poem and non-bolded poem. So this is the simple way to describe what is React. Now we are refreshing the web page and we are losing everything. That is, nothing is saved to any. They are not living in a cookie. They are not living in a server. They are not living in anywhere, only in memory. So this is only front end, and this is the very basics of React. So we have these three things. We have components. We have this app component. We have these poems component, individual poem component, and add poem component. In together they make this whole application. Then besides the components, we have these use states. So we have some kind of variables and methods to change those states. So every time here is happening something, then it's changed in this component, and this takes looks for that, because we have here the onChange set VIP, and here we have this onChange set content. That is working very well. And as a third part, we have these props. So we are giving to this poems component these poems, and this add, which is just like a data structure. It's a use state. And then to this add poem component, we are giving this function, which is then used in the add poem component. This is how you build front-end applications with React. You work with these three basic things, so components, props, and these use states. So this is the basic example. So as a conclusion, React is a very popular front-end library. It's basically the most used by far. I don't know if it's perfect. There might be some better ways to do it, like Svelte or something, but still React is a not bad choice. It's definitely a good choice for your front-end library. It's a tool for very fast development. It uses this JSX, which looks like HTML plus JavaScript. Not everyone likes it. That's why we have different front-end libraries like Angular and such, but this is how React does things. So then when we are developing React things, we are developing components and functions to play with them. And as mentioned, the backend is still built with Node.js or other tool, and the React is then discussing with the backend APIs. That we will cover on some video after this one.